Intuitive writing is a writing method preferred by authors who write organically, writing long and short form fiction without sticking to a formal outline. Intuitive organic writers are referred to as pantsers, as if writing from the seat of their pants, which they don't, while the outliners are called plotters, often placing writers in one of two camps, pantsers and plotters. In the writing and literary world, a friendly tug of war exists between the pantser and plotter groups, the one calling the other at fault. For many outliner writers, such writing method, intuitive writing, is sacrilegious, akin to heresy. Truth be told, it is not so much about who is right or wrong, having to choose the one over the other, but rather what works best for a particular writer and what makes for captivating prose. There is also a third group of writers that lie between the two polar opposites. Writers who combine some form of outlining with intuitive writing. In my 3 published novels, I have combined minimalistic outlining with intuitive writing. For me, much of the story is deliberated mentally and not on paper, mulling it over in my mind before I start writing. My initial and subsequent research often steered the story then into a particular direction. There is no right or wrong method of writing. It's about effective and powerful writing, writing that works, fiction or non-fiction, writing that succeeds in grabbing the reader's attention, gets the message across and makes the reader invest emotionally. It is worthwhile to explore and experiment with different ways of writing and then become comfortable with what works best for you. As is the case with painting in watercolor or oil, one doesn't become a master of either overnight. Stephen King's taking on writing is, it's about the language. It's about how we say what we say, about how we phrase it. King stresses the importance of reading, of copying from the masters. He places an incredible high priority on reading. Imitation is not to be confused with plagiarism. By rewriting in longhand large sections from master storytellers' books, we can learn much from the way they apply language and metaphor, how they handle pacing, tone, and point of view. King says further, the more you read, the less apt you are to make a fool of yourself with your pen or word processor. According to Natalie Goldberg, by spending considerable time with outstanding authors' work, they can become our mentors. They can teach us possible ways to write. For a story to work, the reader must be introduced to the world of the characters, with it being clear from the outset what the main characters want, what they desire. The conflict is initiated by the inciting incident, something goes wrong, and as the story unfolds and more characters are introduced, tension builds up as obstacles are constantly added and desires remain unmet, and interpersonal and internal conflict escalate. It is more about tension and conflict and unmet desires, and less about spectacular action scenes. Best-selling author and writing instructor Stephen James teaches that you don't need an outline to write a good story, only a premise. A premise sentence or short paragraph states what the story is about. The character, protagonist, wants something, desire, but can't get it, encounters an obstacle. Rather than sticking to a 3-act story structure, it is more important to achieve the following 5 things. Let your readers fall in love with your main character. Let them care about him or her, making it clear what is at stake. Orient them to the story world of your story and characters. Then upset the status quo. Let something go wrong. Introduce more characters, adding more obstacles, adding more things that can go wrong. And 5, the conflict continues to escalate until the final climax. James further argues that rather than sticking to detailed plot and scene outlines, having decoded beforehand which fossils will be uncovered, rather to subject your writing to spontaneity and fluidity. Learn to ask good questions while you write. For example, Is this what a character in real life would have done or said? And causality. Is this what I'm writing? Is it a logical step to what has preceded it? And constantly ask, how can I make things worse? I've written my 3 published novels by following an intuitive writing approach with bare-bone outline. I would start with a lengthy premise sentence, jotting down a concept of what I had in mind, the characters involved, and then mull it over in my mind for several weeks while doing my research. The historical and contemporary facts so collected were then woven together with the world of the story, with the settings and scenes, and that would form the backbone to the story. Parallel to that, I would do minimalistic character sketches, a few words and sentences, spending more time on their names and surnames and their background, and especially their characteristics, than on their physical appearance. My chapters usually have a headline, which became a subtle hook from which part of the story would hang, guiding the story forward. Often I would place the characters, so to speak, inside the confines of a chapter, taking a step backward, watching what they come up with. Ready to be surprised, although always keeping in mind where I wish to end up. This never ceases to lead to fascinating twists and turns, keeping the story crisp and spontaneous, not bogging it down by a preconceived form. The latter is not writing by the seat of one's pants, as if writing cluelessly, but rather writing intuitively, organically, becoming sensitive to what the characters would have done and said in real-life situations. By learning to listen to the characters, believe me, they do obtain a life of their own. Closer to real-life situations and scenarios can be portrayed. The art is to listen to your story and ask the right questions, says James. In his book on writing, Stephen King compares writing to unearthing fossils. Outlining your novel to the last red button is deciding beforehand what the fossil and dinosaur will look like that is still to be uncovered and unearthed, King writes. Plot is, I think, the good writer's last resort and the dullard's first choice. There are pros and cons to intuitive or organic writing. The pros: there are no hard and fast rules, although it's not without sound writing principles. Its sole task is to get the reader to invest emotionally. Its goal is to tell a story that is tension-driven, and it ensures spontaneity and lightness in writing. It's organic in nature, and it avoids the machine-like rigidity. And it also avoids the paint-by-number feel to the writing. On the downside, the writer can get sidetracked. It can be a hit and miss, with less balance and coherence. And it can be time-consuming if it makes the writer run into a dead end. So how do we do this? 2 words. Read and write, and do so endlessly. The best is to read widely, to write regularly, and to see what other authors and writers do. Learn from the masters and practice endlessly, trying different techniques and approaches, and discover through success and failure what works best for you. Learn to write from the heart. Be honest, be vulnerable, be strong. Surprise the reader, make them laugh, make them weep, make them gasp and hold their breath. Challenge them. We achieve this by endless practice and by bleeding onto the page.